Your business is running on borrowed time. You just haven't noticed it yet. The hooks you've learned, the scripts, the funnels, the offer frameworks, the ad angles, everything you've spent years working on so you could separate yourselves from the person who hadn't done the work, everybody has it now. They got it for free. They got it overnight and you didn't even realize it happened. And here's what nobody's going to tell you. No one's selling you the next course, the next tactic, or the next framework are going to tell you either. Because if you figure this out, they are out of business and they are finished. There's one layer to this that cannot be touched and it cannot be copied. That no tool, no platform, and no algorithm has commoditized. And nothing ever will. And almost nobody is working on it. So the question is whether you're going to be one of the people that does, or you're going to be one of the people that quietly watches their business fade over the next 3 years and has no understanding of why. Let me describe something for you and let me know if it sounds familiar. You're doing the work. You're posting, you're running the calls, you're writing the emails, you're building the offers. You know the game. You've studied the game. You can spot a good hook at 30 pages and know why it works. And yet, something isn't landing the way it used to. The posts that would have gone viral 2 years ago are now doing just okay. The DMs that used to work now get left unread. The calls feel slower. The prospects seem more skeptical, more distracted, harder to move. And you're not doing anything wrong. You're still doing exactly what you did before, maybe even better. But the results aren't matching the effort. So you do what anyone would do. And you push harder, you work harder. You post more. You test new hooks, you buy another course, you rebuild the funnel, you try the new platform everyone else is talking about, you swap the scripts, you rewrite the offer, and you up the ad spend. Some of it works a little, most of it doesn't. And the things that do work for a week or two before the effect fades. And this is the part most people won't say out loud. Because saying it out loud feels like admitting failure. It feels like something's wrong with you or your offer or your skills. And so you keep it to yourself and watch other people in your space, people who are obviously no smarter than you or better than you, slowly pulling ahead. You just can't quite figure out why. And there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your offer and your skills are fine. The thing that's happening isn't personal. It's not your fault. And pushing harder isn't going to fix it. That lever has broke. The game has changed underneath you now. And most people in your industry haven't realized it yet either. And some of them never will. But you're watching it happen in real time every time you post and you're not getting the results you thought you would. So what actually happened? Because something did. Something specific and recent. And almost nobody in your industry has reckoned with it properly yet. They've noticed symptoms. They're blaming the algorithm, the market, the economy, the saturation, the attention span of their audience. And none of that is the real answer. The real answer is much simpler, but much worse. For the last decade, the edge in online business went to whoever knew the mechanics best. The person who learned the current platform before everyone else. The person who cracked the current hook format. The person who had the current funnel structure. And mechanics produced asymmetric results because most people didn't have them. That era is now over. AI has commoditized content. And a tool that costs $20 a month can now generate hooks, write emails, draft scripts, produce posts, and build funnels in minutes. Templates that used to sell for hundreds of dollars are now free. Frameworks that used to be the differentiator between a six-figure business and a struggling one are in every YouTube video, every podcast, and every single thread. And the tactics themselves have collapsed in value. Not because they stopped working, but because everyone has them now. And this is worth sitting with. The thing that used to set people apart, knowing what to do, no longer sets anyone apart. Knowing what to do is the baseline. It is the price of entry, not the edge. So the question becomes, if the mechanics are commoditized, what isn't? And there's one layer underneath all of it. One layer that every tactic, every script, every funnel, every piece of content is ultimately trying to reach. And that layer hasn't moved. The human on the other side of the transaction. How they decide, what they fear, what they actually want as opposed to what they say they want. What makes them trust one person but dismiss another? What makes them act now instead of bookmarking the offer and then forgetting about it? Why, out of every option they have in front of them, they pick one. And why it's almost never the option with the best features or benefits. That layer cannot be commoditized. You cannot copy and paste an understanding of why people buy. It has to be learned, it has to be practiced, it has to be internalized. No tool can hand it to you, no template contains it, and no script captures it. Which is why there is a window right now, very short, but very real, Human psychology has not changed in the last 100,000 years, and it's not going to change in the next 10. The brain that evaluates your offer right now in 2026 is the same brain that evaluated tribal membership 50,000 years ago. Platforms expire, tactics expire, the human operating system does not. And here's what this looks like in practice. The people spending the next 2 or 3 years learning this layer will compound away from everyone else. Not because they have the best mechanics, because their mechanics will look pretty similar to everyone else's. They'll compound because the same mechanics run by someone who understands the human layer produce fundamentally different results. A post written by a mechanics-only operator lands flat. The same post run by someone who understands trust and attention converts. And let me make this concrete. Picture the version of your business where the content you post actually gets read instead of scrolled past, where the DMs you send get answered almost immediately instead of ignored, where a prospect arrives at your conversation already half convinced because your content did the heavy lifting, where the offer you've been selling for months suddenly starts converting at 2 or 3 times the usual rate, without you ever changing the offer, just how you reframe it. This isn't some kind of fantasy land. This is the results this kind of work produces, reliably for people who show up and use it. And it doesn't take years to start seeing the difference either. The first results can show up in a matter of weeks because the human psychology is consistent enough that once you understand it, even small adjustments in how you communicate can produce incredible results. The difference isn't in what they're doing. The difference is in what they understand about who they're doing it for. And that difference compounds into a completely different business in the space of a year. So here's where this gets a little bit uncomfortable. Everything I've said so far is something you can intellectually agree with and then walk away from. Nod along, close the tab, go back to what you were doing. That's what most people watching this video are going to do. Not because they disagree, because agreeing with an argument and changing what you do are two completely different things. The gap between understanding something and acting on it is where most businesses in your industry are currently dying. Slowly, quietly, and without the owner even realizing it's happening. And so I want to be direct with you for a minute. You already know most of what I've told you. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you've been watching this shift happen. You've noticed the returns getting smaller, and you've noticed the tactics returning a little bit less than usual. You've had the thought, maybe for months, maybe even longer, that something has changed and you haven't adapted to it yet. And here's what the next 3 years look like for most people in your industry. No dramatic collapses, no sudden failures, something slower and a little harder to see while it's happening. It's in the posts that do a little less each quarter, ad costs that creep up for the same result, and calls that take a little longer to close with a little more resistance for slightly smaller deals. They're going to blame things like the algorithm, the economy, the audience, saturation, their niche, and platforms. But none of those are the real answer. The real answer is that the layer they've been operating on has stopped being enough, and they never learned to operate on the layer underneath it. By the time the fade is obvious enough to take seriously, the gap between them and the people who started this work 2 years earlier will be too wide to close quickly. Not impossible, but slow and painful and expensive. But that's the default path. That's what happens when you don't choose something different. And the reason I'm making this video, the reason I'm putting this much pressure on in a video that nobody's paid me to make, is because the path away from the fade is not hard. It's not complicated, and it doesn't require a bigger audience or a better offer or a new niche. It requires one decision. The decision to stop operating at the layer everyone else is operating at and start operating at one layer deeper. Everyone who's ever made that decision in front of me, and I've watched hundreds of people make it, describe the same thing afterwards. That the work gets easier, not harder. That the results get bigger for less effort, and that they wish they'd done it sooner. And I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this because the version of you watching this now has a specific window that the version of you watching this in 18 months will not have. Right now, the shift is early enough that the effort of learning the new layer will put you ahead of almost everyone. In 18 months, more people will have started. In 3 years, it'll be the baseline the same way the mechanics used to be. The question isn't whether to do this work. The question is whether you do it when it gives you an advantage or whether you do it later, when it's the price of staying in the game at all. Both of those paths end in the same place eventually, doing the work. The difference is whether you do it from ahead or behind. And I want to say one more thing because it matters. Most people who watch a video like this feel a rush of relief and then forget it the next day, because the brain treats the rush as the event. It mistakes the feeling for understanding something for how you actually operate. A week from now, you'll be doing exactly the same thing you were doing before. and you won't remember why any of this was urgent in the first place. Don't do that. Whatever you take from this, agreement, disagreement, curiosity, do something with it before the end of the day. One concrete action that moves you toward the layer I've been describing rather than away from it. Because the difference between the people who compound and the people who fade is almost never the size of the action they take. It's whether they take any at all before the feeling wears off. And here's what I'll leave you with. 5 years from now, there's going to be two groups of people who started businesses in the industry you're in right now. The first group will look roughly the same as they do today. Maybe a little bigger, maybe a little smaller. Still pushing on the mechanics. Still chasing the next tactic. Still wondering why it's getting harder every year to get the same result. Still convinced they're only one funnel away from breaking through. They won't have figured it out. Not because they couldn't have, just because they didn't. The second group is going to look totally different. They'll be running smaller businesses that make more money. They'll be posting less and getting more. They'll be having fewer sales calls with prospects who are already half convinced before picking up the phone. They'll be charging more and hearing less resistance. They'll have the thing that almost everyone in the industry claims to want but never actually gets. A business that feels calm instead of frantic, certain instead of anxious, and compounding instead of grinding. And they won't be working any harder than the first group. In most cases, they'll be working less. And the difference between the two groups won't be effort. It'll be about what they understood about the people they're trying to reach. And the gap between the two groups right now is almost nothing. A few months of attention, a few decisions about where you point your effort. That's it. That's the whole difference between the person who compounds and the person who fades. But compound for 5 years and that gap becomes a canyon. You get to choose which side of it you're on. Not in some vague future moment when the time is better. Today, with the next thing you do after you close this video. If any of this has hit something for you, if you've recognized in yourself in what I've described, and you want to actually do something with that feeling instead of letting it fade, there's a link below in this video in the description where you can find a community of people doing this work. I'm not going to pitch you here, I'm just going to show you the door. And if you want to keep watching, the next video goes deeper into why most people never take action even when they understand they need to.